conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Hi, and welcome the Renewed Mind. I'm your host, Rommel Gussain, and today we have with us Colin, who'll be discussing with us a little bit more about this subject, this addiction called porn. First of all, welcome to the show, Colin.
Thanks, Rommel.
Now, Colin, if we can start off by defining our terms. What is porn? What is pornography?
There's a couple of different ways to look at it, I think. Probably the best place to start is what Jesus says on the Sermon on the Mount. So in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus says, you've heard it said that it's wrong to commit adultery, but I tell you that if you look at a woman lustfully, you've already committed adultery with her in your heart. And I actually think that's a really good definition for porn. If you're looking at a woman lustfully, that's kind of porn for you. Now, that covers a really broad range. So maybe for practical purposes, we can kind of narrow it down a bit better. I would say, at least for the topic that we're talking about now, porn is well, I guess if you masturbate to it, it's porn. There's really no question about that. It doesn't matter what you're looking at. If you masturbate to it, it's porn. If you didn't masturbate to it, but it's all about, sex and you've got to be over 18 in order to see it, then that's porn as well. But those two are going to cover, well, the first one's going to cover basically everything.
That's right.
And the second one is going to cover those very small cases where, but I looked at it, but I didn't masturbate, and so therefore it's not porn. Well, it is porn if it's all about sex.
Yes.
So I think that's probably a helpful definition of porn for our purposes. And the most common porn easily is the videos and pictures of people having sex on the internet or in magazines or on DVDs or whatever. And that's what I would call porn.
And it's quite interesting, isn't it, Colin, that the internet has opened up so many more people now to the possibility and the accessibility of being able to retrieve pornography. I mean, many of these people would not go, especially people that are underage, wouldn't necessarily go to places to acquire and purchase this type of material, but now it's at your home, it's in your bedroom, and it's even on your little devices, and it's very easy to be able to go out and get this stuff.
Yeah, that's part of the problem of porn, at least in the modern day, is that it's so accessible and it's so easy, and you can keep it a secret and no one ever needs to know. At least that's what we believe.
Yes.
So it's a real problem.
So now you've defined it for us, but is it a sin?
Oh, without question. It is, absolutely. I mean, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says that, if you look at a woman lustfully, that's actually adultery in your heart. We already know that adultery is a sin. And so porn, every time you look at porn, what you're doing is looking at a woman lustfully. So that has to be a sin. There's no question about that at all. And anyone who tries to convince themselves, oh, it's okay because I'm really, at least I'm not sleeping with anyone, or at least I'm not, actually going out and acting out, they're going to have to deal with Jesus' Sermon on the Mount that says, look at a woman lustfully, that's adultery.
Yes, and that was quite a high standard that Jesus was setting. I mean, the Jews were quite used to, Matthew chapter 5, the Jews were quite used to, believing that the act was the sin. But Jesus was saying no. Yeah. In God's eyes, it's not just the act, it's the thought. And it's quite possible for someone to close their eyes, as I am, and to think about things that are wrong, and God considers that to be wrong. Yeah. And so we can see that pornography is definitely something that is displeasing to God. But then, if porn is wrong, why is it so tempting, especially to Christians?
It's tempting because it promises something, and it kind of promises something that we actually really do need. But what it promises, it doesn't deliver. I'll try to explain that a bit more. Everyone has an inbuilt need for a whole number of things. The biggest one is that we need to know that we're loved. For men, what that means is that we need to know that we're valued and that we are, important in someone's eyes, that we actually matter to someone. That's that's love, but at least in Australia, guys don't really like talking about love in that way. So, but that is what it is.
Yes.
It's important to be valued and seen as significant, and that you matter to someone. That's really important. In life, many men just don't feel that. And porn promises it. It says, if you look at porn, then you're going to feel like you matter to someone, like you matter to the people in the video. You're going to be, important because you're going to be in control and you can do whatever you want and that kind of stuff. And many men go to porn as an escape from the real world because they can't deal with, their boss shouted at them at work because they did something wrong, or their wife got angry at them because they did something wrong, or their kids are out of control and they don't know what to do. And many men turn to porn to make them feel better about that.
Wow, that's really fascinating. I mean, it's almost like other addictions, drug addictions, where people use that substance just to switch off from the world and just to think about good things or do good things and feel better.
Mm-hmm. It's very, very common. And you can tell because, people often say, oh, no, that's not the case for me. I just want to go look at porn because I feel really turned on and I've got this really strong sexual drive and I need to have an outlet somewhere, otherwise, it'll be really terrible. But you ask them, the next question is, well, when is it that you're most tempted to look at porn? When does that happen? And they say, oh, I don't know, I just felt really turned on. And I go, well, okay, well, what happened that day? And then they start saying, well, I don't know, I did something wrong at work. And you go, oh, really? That's interesting. What about the last time you were tempted at porn? Oh, I don't know, I guess I was having a hard day at work. And you start to put the pieces together. And even though that person may not see it themselves, when you start asking those questions and you start to see the pattern that's there, it's true for them even when they don't realize it.
Yes, yes. And so people that do engage in regular porn, are these people somehow they're deficient in some way? I mean, is there something that's inherently wrong with them? Is that what we're saying or no?
Oh, well, there's something inherently wrong with everyone in that we're all sinful.
Yes.
So in that sense, yeah, that's true. But not in the sense of, there's
they're
someone
weaker or something like that?
No, not in that sense. So, everyone is sinful, everyone is weak, everyone is fallen, but you can't sort of single out people who have a porn problem as being any worse than someone who has a greed problem, for example. That's really unhelpful and really dangerous to kind of be thinking in those lines. And Christians often really labour under this huge amount of shame that, I'm a Christian, I shouldn't be struggling with these sexual things, something must be wrong with me.
Yes.
And, because you're not supposed to struggle with this thing, and so I must be unspiritual, or I must be a failure as a Christian, or something like that. And that's so untrue. And it really grieves me when I hear people say that. But the truth is that, actually I can think of 7 really good reasons why it is that we will struggle sexually, and I'll rattle them off really quickly. The first one is that God says we will. That's kind of enough, really.
Pretty easy, yes.
Yeah, the Bible says that we are going to struggle in all sorts of different ways, including sexually, so that should be enough. But there's 6 other reasons too. Firstly, we're fallen. Being a Christian means that we're still fallen, forgiven, but still fallen. The second is that we live in a fallen world, and the world that we live in influences us. And it's very, very difficult to completely be uninfluenced by the world around you unless you want to, go and live on the top of a mountain somewhere and never interact with anyone, which is not what the Bible says to do.
Yes.
But, yeah. So that's the second one. The world is fallen and it influences us. Thirdly, as Christians, we actually have a predator, we have an enemy. And Satan really wants to see Christians fall. Now, as Christians, he doesn't really have any power over us. So we don't really need to fear him, but he is allowed to have an influence on us in the same way that the world does. So the world can't control us, but it can influence us. Satan can't control us, but he can influence us. And so we need to be wary of that. The fourth one, what am I up to? The fifth one, I think, or the fourth one, is that God actually gave us to have a biological drive to have sex. He actually gave that to us on purpose, and he doesn't apologize for it, and he doesn't say, oh, I'm sorry about that whole sexual thing, I really don't know what I was thinking.
So we're not saying that sex is wrong, because
Definitely
some people
not.
think that the Bible, sex is a taboo, and the ultimate state of holiness is not being married and not having any sexual urges. Is that right or wrong?
That's, it's absolutely wrong to say that sex in itself is bad, or somehow that not having sex or not being sexual is somehow more holy than being sexual. Because God made sex and it is a holy thing. He gave it certain boundaries, in where it's supposed to happen, so in marriage. And outside of that, it's kind of damaging and not very helpful. But within marriage, sex is really good and holy and awesome and wonderful
fun.
and fun.
Yes.
And so there's lots of really good things to say about that. And God gave us this biological drive
Yes.
to have sex, but He asks us to control it, and that's the difference. So we can control it. It's not completely out of our power. We certainly can. But I wouldn't want to suggest that, sex is wrong or bad in some way. But we do have this drive to have sex, and that influences us as well in the topic of sexual temptation, and porn in particular. But I think that the biggest reason, I think we're up to number 6 now, is that that we actually have this inbuilt need to be loved. What I talked about before, we need to be valued, and we need to be seen as important. And if we're not seen as important, we'll go anywhere that we possibly can find in order to find it. One of those places is porn, but there's plenty of other places that people go as well to feel that need. I mean, workaholism, getting absorbed into your work. There's, of course, alcohol. There's just withdrawing and not wanting to talk to anyone because if I talk to someone, maybe they might say that I'm bad. There's many, many, many different ways that people can try to meet that need. But the only way it's really met is in Jesus, because of Jesus' death, God values me so highly, and I am very important in God's eyes because I'm important enough to die for, and you don't get any more important than that.
Yes.
So
yes.
That's the 6th reason. The 7th and final reason is that in spite of being a Christian and in spite of all these risks around us, God doesn't take away our freedom to choose. We wish He would sometimes, but the truth is that He does give us the freedom to choose, along with all the consequences that come with that.
Yes.
And so when temptation comes, God doesn't take that temptation away. He says, here is this temptation. I'm allowing you to experience this temptation because I want you to grow through it.
Yes.
It was a terrific thing that I learnt in my own story, that after I'd been out of porn for several years, I actually remembered the prayer that I prayed way, way, way back just after I became a Christian.
Wow.
Where, Bible says I'm sinful. I don't see the sin in my life, but I believe the Bible, so God, please show me where my sin is. And I learned that He was actually spending those 4 years of me being addicted to porn and everything that went along with that, showing me exactly where my sin was. And so having come out of that, definitely porn is bad, but God promises that He will use everything for our good. So even the badness of those 4 years of addicted to porn, He still taught me, Colin, you really are sinful, and now you can see it for yourself. And I'm like, wow, yeah, I really can. That's
right.
huge.
And I think one of the amazing things that I sense from your life is the power of your testimony. I shouldn't even say it's your testimony, it's God's testimony.
It's God's testimony. He's the one who did all the work.
Yes, and so that now there are so many people who struggle, have this addiction, Christian or non-Christian, and God is using you to be able to explain to them, the struggles, the battle, and how it is that God can help someone to overcome this addiction. And it is an addiction. And I think our society endeavors to try and make us believe that there's nothing wrong with porn.
Yes.
It's a cool thing. It's a manly thing, to look at some porn, but it's quite destructive as you described it to us. Now, but for the Christians specifically, some Christians perhaps might believe this lie. If God forgives us, then if I look at porn, it doesn't really matter because God's going to forgive me anyway.
And the funny thing about that is that it's kind of half true, because God does forgive us for everything that we do, and nothing that we do can separate us from God's love. We can't be too bad for Him. We can't be so evil that God says, I'm sorry, I've had enough and you need to go, because Jesus has paid for everything. But at the same time, even though we're 100% forgiven, there is still the issue of consequences, because our sin has consequences, and even though God forgives us, He doesn't take those consequences away. And so I can think of I can think of 2 examples actually from the Bible. One of them is Samson. So you would know that Samson had a very miraculous birth. His birth was announced by an angel, He was given a very powerful gift when the Spirit came on him of being incredibly strong. He was given the task of saving Israel from the Philistines. So he was given very, I guess we would say now, impressive kind of gifts from God. But he didn't control his sexual appetite, and he ended up making the wrong choice with the wrong woman.
He was irresponsible, yes.
Very irresponsible. And in spite of all of those things, he still chose wrongly, and he lost his eyesight, he lost his strength, and he lost his freedom. He was taken as a slave. So even though he is forgiven, even though and he still went on to actually achieve the purpose against the Philistines that God raised him up to do. So it's not like Samson was a complete failure. Not at all. God actually redeemed him in his captivity and made him, a powerful kind of killing many more Philistines than he had when he was alive. But God didn't take away his consequences of losing his eyesight and losing his freedom and losing his strength. David is an even better example. King David is this enormous character in the Old Testament who's just given these outrageous promises from God about how I'm going to, make your throne last forever, and all this incredible stuff.
And God associates his name with him. A man after my own heart, the
How
Bible
huge
says.
is that?
Yes.
It's terrific. But even though after he'd been established on the throne for a bit, he made the wrong choice with his armies. When he should have been out fighting on the front line, he was staying at home. He made the wrong choice of where to look, and he saw, of course, Bathsheba, and he then made the wrong choice of inviting her in and sleeping with her. And then, if that wasn't enough, he made the wrong choice of trying to cover up the pregnancy by killing her husband. So a whole number of bad choices there. And when he went to Nathan came to David and said, God says that you have done this really bad thing. David says, oh, it's true, I confess, please forgive me. And God said through Nathan, you are completely forgiven. However, the child that you are born with will not survive, and he dies. In addition, you're going to lose your concubines and your palace later on, which is what happens with one of his sons. But one of his sons ends up causing up a rebellion, and he loses his palace and his concubines to that. And in particular, the entire nation of Israel is broken in two because of civil war. As a direct result, God said, of his wrong choice with Bathsheba. So make no mistake, God forgives, absolutely, but he doesn't take the consequences of our sin away. He leaves them with us so that we will deal with them and we hope, grow because of them.
Yes, that's right. I mean, it's so important that people can see and understand the reason why God places these rules before us. It's not because he's, a vindictive, mean, bitter God.
No.
He's trying to get back at us whenever we do something that's wrong, or he's simply a party pooper. No, God places them there for us because they're quite dangerous and they're hurtful and harmful for us. I mean, what was so wrong with, David taking another man's wife for himself? He's the king. Why can't he do that? Well, it's wrong because he's ripping apart another family. The sanctity of marriage, that wonderful relationship in which two people make a vow before God, God honors that. And God takes that seriously. And for another person, regardless of their authority or position, to come in and separate that because they're supposed to be more responsible, but they're being irresponsible, God takes quite offense to that. And I think it's such a wonderful thing to know that we have a God that is all forgiving, but he does not whitewash sin.
That's right.
And that is so important, because sometimes people think that Christianity, everything is okay, everything is allowed. No, not everything is permissible. Definitely not. But God is a forgiving God. And so then, why is our society so geared towards porn in various forms?
There's probably a lot of reasons for that, but I think the biggest one is that our society is just fallen, and our society is kind of broken and messed up, and we just kind of have to live with that. I mean, our society kind of just doesn't see that there's a problem with porn, and I grieve so much when I hear non-Christian counsellors who are prescribing, a couple comes to them and says, oh, we're having trouble in our marriage, we're having trouble with our sex life in whatever way. And the counsellor goes, that's really interesting. I think you should look at porn because that will really help your marriage. I get so angry at that.
Why? Why is that wrong? What will that do?
That will destroy the marriage.
How? How will it destroy it? Specifically, I mean, some people will be watching this episode, be thinking, what's wrong with that? I mean, you're only watching something and perhaps learning something, right?
Yeah. It really comes down to the fact that every single thing that porn teaches you is a lie. And I really do mean everything. You might say, oh, well, but porn at least teaches you kind of how sex works. And I'm just saying, well, actually, no, I disagree with you even on that. Porn teaches you that women have the sex drive of men, and they don't. Women have a different sex drive to men, and it's still good and wonderful, but it's not the same as men. Porn teaches you that women are always ready for sex whenever you feel like it, and they're not, and they shouldn't be. And to think that, my wife isn't ready for sex and so there's something wrong with her, that's horrific. Women are wonderful, cherished, should be cherished by their husbands, and not kind of, expected and made to, perform on cue like the women do in porn. Porn teaches you that, women have to have, big breasts and certain shaped body in order to be acceptable, which is horrifically untrue. Porn teaches you that you as a man need to be, muscular and have an enormous penis in order to be masculine, and that's just a lie as well. And the more you look at porn, the more you start to believe the lies that it tells you, and it changes you, usually without you even realizing.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, even the act itself, it's quite contradictory to the way a normal, loving couple would engage in the act itself.
Oh, very much so.
It's almost like animals, And so even in terms of learning, that's probably maybe 99.9% of that type of material. You're not going to learn anything, I mean, because some people say that, well, not all of it is hardcore, not all of it treats women like they're a piece of meat, but 99.9% of it does, and that's the reality. And so, but how does that answer the question then? Why is our society so geared towards it?
It's hard to answer that. I guess our society just genuinely believes that it's okay to do whatever you want, and as long as you're not hurting anyone, then that's okay.
Then it's fine.
Of course, porn is actually hurting people. It's hurting people in the industry who are actually performing, and it's hurting you, not physically, but it's hurting you kind of psychologically because you're believing all these lies.
What do you mean it's hurting people that are in the industry?
Okay, there's a terrific woman called Shelley Lubben. She has a website that is just absolutely terrific, and I won't go into too much detail because she can say it a lot better than I can. Her story is that she was in the sex industry and a porn actress for a number of years, and thanks to God, somehow came out of that and then afterwards became a Christian. And God has just worked in her life. Her story is horrific and inspiring at the same time. But her story, she's been in the porn industry. She knows exactly what happens there. And she has statistics like, 2/3 of all porn stars have herpes, which is a sexually transmitted disease that has no cure. 2/3, probably more. Every porn actor and actress is on drugs and on alcohol because they just need to in order to get through the trauma of what the sex industry does to them. And perform. And it's just so damaging to them. She says, and she's right, the porn industry is full of really, really sick, really, really broken people. And it's terrible. We need to have compassion on the people in the porn industry because of what they go through. So Shelley's actually set up this wonderful ministry called the Pink Cross that actually brings Jesus to the porn industry and brings people out of that. Her website has a whole number of stories of people who have come out of the porn industry and become Christians, and it's just, every single one of their stories is heartbreaking, but it's just so wonderful to see God working in their lives.
Yes. So then why is it so dangerous? How can it hurt me?
If you start believing the lies that porn teaches you, and you will, then that's the biggest way that it's going to hurt you. because you're going to start believing all sorts of things about women, all sorts of things about yourself, all sorts of things about sex that just aren't true. And when you start interacting with the real world, with real women and with your real self and with real sex with your wife, you're going to be damaged. You're going to have to unlearn all of these things that you learn. You're going to have to forget all of these things that you've seen, which you can't. You can't forget all of these things that you've seen. And it's tremendously difficult to unlearn all of these things that you've kind of subconsciously picked up because you've just been absorbing all of these lies from porn. It's terrifically damaging. Not physically, but in a much deeper way that changes who you are and changes the way that you think. And that's much more dangerous.
That's right. I mean, you've touched on such an important point there. I mean, the way now we view other people will dramatically change. You know, if you're completely consumed by this thing, or if this has become an important part of your life, it does change your pattern of behavior. It will change you psychologically. And as you said, it is a lie of the devil to believe that this can somehow improve me, better me, or can be a small part of my life and unaffect me. You know, thank you so much, Colin, for your time. Thank you for sharing your insight on this controversial and important subject.
Thanks, Rommel.
To our viewers, we really hope and pray that you've been able to see for yourself that this subject is quite dangerous. There are many dangers of pornography. And if you've never discovered these for yourself, if you've never heard this, I'm sure that your conscience has alluded you or shown you that yes, there are dangers, but you've never explored them. You've never been able to study them. Well, thank God that He has given us His Word, the Bible, which describes to us the boundaries of how He wants us to live. His way is the best way. He wants us to have a wonderful relationship with our friends, with our family, with our wives, and He wants us to have a wonderful relationship with Himself. May God bless you, and please stay in tune for the very next episode of Renewed Mind. And until then, may the Lord bless you.